This is a true story that defies the laws of God and man. The couple who dated each other for 6 months without knowing they were siblings, they weren't just in love, they were an obsession. Theirs was a story of two souls crossing an ocean and a continent only to collide in a tragedy that the ancestors of Igboland had spent centuries trying to prevent. Before the blood turned bitter, before the red mud of Udi swallowed their dreams, there was only the heat. Chidi Okeke was a man of steel and silence. At 26, he was a mechanical engineer in Enugu, known for his precision. He lived his life by the laws of physics. If a beam was strong enough, it would hold. If a foundation was deep enough, it would stand. He was the only son of Chief Okeke, a powerful, widowed traditional title holder who had raised Chidi with a strict hand and a heart full of expectations. Chidi was the golden boy of the coal city, but his heart was a fortress, unmoved by the many women his father tried to introduce to him. Then there was Amara. She was a doctoral student, a woman of books and whispers who had just returned to Nigeria after 15 years in London. To her, the world wasn't made of steel, but of stories. She had grown up in the UK with her mother, Evelyn, a sophisticated woman who had fled Nigeria after a painful divorce when Amara was just a child. Evelyn had kept Amara's past in Nigeria a locked room, never speaking of her biological father or the land she came from. Amara had come home to Lagos to research her thesis, searching for her roots, but she had no idea how deep and tangled those roots truly were. They met at a gallery in Lekki. Chidi was there on a business trip inspecting a project. Amara was there seeking inspiration. When their eyes met, it wasn't just attraction. It was a recognition. It felt like they had known each other in a previous life. Within weeks, the logical, calculated Chidi did something he had never done. He fell into a reckless, all-consuming love. He didn't just want Amara. He wanted to fuse his life with hers. In a gesture that shocked even his closest friends, Chidi surrendered his world to her. "I have spent my life building things that can be measured," he whispered to her one night as they watched the Atlantic waves hit the shore. "But I cannot measure what I feel for you." To prove his devotion, he did the unthinkable. He gave Amara full access to his financial life. He handed her the passwords to his high-yield investment accounts and a black credit card tied to his primary engineering firm account. "Everything I build for you," he said. "My bank is your bank. My future is your future." They spent their evenings in Lagos and weekends in Enugu, planning a life of luxury. They chose a plot of land in the rolling hills of Udi, his ancestral home. They hired an architect to design a mansion with 5 bedrooms. They even chose the names of their unborn children, Obina for their first son and Zina for their daughter. They were so busy looking at the horizon that they never looked at the names on their birth certificates. In Enugu, Chief Okeke was preparing for his own late-life joy. He had met Evelyn, Amara's mother, during a business trip to London the year prior. It was a whirlwind romance between two lonely elders. "My son," the chief told Chidi over a bottle of expensive schnapps, "Evelyn is the woman who will bring light back to this house. She has a daughter too, a brilliant girl finishing her PhD. When we marry, our families become one. You will finally have the sister you never had to share this inheritance with." Chidi, distracted by his own wedding plans, laughed and patted his father's shoulder. "I'm happy for you, Papa. And I have my own news. I've found the one. I'm bringing her to your traditional wedding. It will be a double celebration for the Okeke house." Neither man realized they were describing the same family. Because Amara's mother had kept her daughter's identity private to avoid jinxing the relationship, and because Chidi had kept Amara away from the village to protect her from traditional prying, the two paths were moving toward a head-on collision. The day of the Igbo Nkwu traditional wedding was a masterpiece of Igbo culture. The Okeke compound in Udi was a sea of gold and white. The scent of seasoned goat meat and Nkwobi filled the air. The Ojin singers were in a trance, their gongs clanging a rhythm that seemed to warn of impending doom. Chief Okeke stood tall in his gold-embroidered isi agu, radiating pride. Beside him stood Evelyn, looking like a queen in her tiered lace wrapper and a jewel that reached for the heavens. Chidi arrived as the sun began to set. He stepped out of his SUV and reached back to take Amara's hand. She was breathtaking in a custom-made gown. On her finger sat the silver engagement ring Chidi had bought with 3 months' salary, a ring she had purchased using the very account Chidi had opened for her. "Are you ready?" Chidi asked. "I've never been more ready to be an Okeke," Amara replied. They walked toward the high table. The crowd fell silent, admiring the beautiful couple. Chidi stepped forward, his chest out. "Papa," Chidi announced, his voice booming. "This is Amara, the woman I have given my life and my wealth to. The woman I am going to marry." The music didn't just stop. It felt like the air was sucked out of the world. Chief Okiki's face turned from bronze to a sickly, ashen gray. Behind him, Evelyn let out a scream that tore through the village air like a jagged blade. She pointed a shaking finger at Amara. "Amara?" Evelyn gasped, her voice cracking into a million pieces. "What is this? Why are you with this man?" "Mummy," Amara's face went white. "This is Chidi, my fiancé." The chief stepped forward, his voice a terrifying low rumble that shook the ground. "Chidi, this woman is Evelyn's daughter. My wife's daughter. My daughter by marriage. My son, you have been sleeping with your own sister." The revelation shattered the evening. The elders of Udi stood up, chanting, "Alu, Alu, abomination." In Igbo tradition, even a step-sibling relationship of this nature is a spiritual stain that requires the most agonizing of cleansings. The crowd began to hiss. The aunties wailed. The abomination had been consummated. Chidi, driven to a state of temporary insanity by the thought of losing the woman he had physically and financially bonded himself to, grabbed Amara's hand. "We didn't know," he roared at his father. "The money is already spent. The plans are already drawn. We are not siblings, we are one." But the village was closing in. The elders were already calling for the masquerades to come and cast them out. In a moment of sheer, desperate madness, Chidi pulled Amara toward his car. "We are leaving," he screamed. "We will go to Cotonou. We will go to London. They cannot have us." They fled into the night as a massive tropical storm broke over the Udi hills. The rain fell in sheets of iron, turning the red earth into a slick, treacherous trap. Chidi drove like a demon was chasing him, his eyes fixed on the road, while Amara sat in the passenger seat, clutching the folder of their house plans and the bank statements that proved their union. "We are ghosts, Chidi," she whispered, her voice dead. "We died the moment we stepped into that compound." Chidi didn't see the erosion. The bypass road had been hollowed out by the storm. The car hit the edge and launched into the blackness of the Udi ravine, a 200-foot drop into the jagged rocks and rushing water below. They weren't found for 3 days. When the search party finally reached the wreckage, they found them in the back seat. They had crawled toward each other in their final moments. They were locked in an embrace so tight that the rescuers had to break Chidi's arms to separate them. The village elders, fearful of the curse, decreed that they could not be buried in ancestral soil. Their bodies were taken to the evil forest, cast into an unmarked pit without a coffin, without a prayer, and without a name. Chief Okiki never spoke again. He spent his remaining years sitting on a plastic chair by the edge of the ravine, staring into the dark. Evelyn returned to London, a hollow shell of a woman who would scream whenever she heard the sound of a silver bell. And the money? The millions in Chidi's accounts, the wealth he had given her all access to? It sat in the bank, frozen by the law, untouched and rotting, a digital monument to a love that was never meant to exist. Beware the fruit you pluck in a forest you do not know, for the sweetest taste often hides the bitterest blood. The tragedy of Chidi and Amara serves as a haunting reminder that love does not exist in a vacuum. Here are the core lessons from their downfall. The danger of secrecy. By keeping their relationship a secret world, they remove the safety net of family and community. In a culture where marriage is the union of two lineages, early transparency is the only way to avoid the union of shadows. Knowledge before commitment. Chidi surrendered his life and finances to a woman whose past was a locked room. True intimacy requires more than shared bank accounts. It requires a deep understanding of each other's roots and history. Ignorance is not innocence. In the eyes of tradition and the ancestors, an abomination, and so Allah, remains a stain regardless of intent. Their story warns us that some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed by excuses of, "we didn't know." Trust your intuition. Both felt the heavy air and the trap before the revelation. Never ignore the spiritual or emotional weight of a situation. Your gut often senses a disaster before your mind can see the facts. The final word. Build your future on a foundation of truth, for a house built on secrets will eventually be swallowed by the red mud of the past.